Greetings, everyone. My name is Dr. Jay Singh, and I'm the founder of Publication Academy, your online training partner for higher ed career advancement and professional development. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today for this installment of our Career Pathway series, Exiting Academia. Today, we have a fascinating interview with Dr. Anne Alley, who successfully transitioned from completing a PhD in linguistics into the exciting industry vertical of IT services. So let's get right into it. Over now to our amazing Publication Academy interviewer, Dr. Gertrude Nantra.
Hello, everyone. Dr. G. Nantra here, and I am super excited to have Dr. Anne Ali with me today. Thank you for coming to speak with me, Dr. Ali.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's start with your educational background and what eventually led to you choosing to leave academia.
Yeah, so I started grad school not really knowing what I was doing, what to expect. I started in a modern languages program. I was studying Spanish and Portuguese linguistics. I was teaching and hadn't even considered a PhD till maybe the second year. Someone suggested it to me. I didn't know what else to do. So I applied and started my PhD at UCLA. I continued in with more formal linguistics after that. And about 2 years in, I started to realize that the path to getting a tenure track job was really unlikely for most people. And even for the folks that it was likely for, the path was really, really difficult and the salary wasn't as good as I expected. So after I had a couple of, life crises and some reflection, I realized I don't think I want to do that. I think I'd rather opt for a more likely job where I'm not spending 5 years trying to get tenure and I might not get tenure. I think the other thing is I saw two professors not get tenure while I was in grad school and how it really just altered the paths of their careers. And also, I wanted to make a good salary. I grew up low income. I knew I was going to have more financial responsibilities than the average person. I was already dealing with sick family and elder care, even in my 20s in grad school. So taking a low-paying job for the love of the field was not an option for me.
Yeah. No, thank you for that answer, because I think, one of the things I'm learning as I do this series is that grad students, our journeys are so varied and we're not a monolith, because like you, for some people, like that's not even a problem, right? Having parents and elder or family members in elder care, realizing that even without maybe for most people, for a lot of people, not most, but for a lot of people, maybe your financial responsibility kicks in when you get married and have kids. But for some people, it starts way earlier than that, and so like taking all of that into account and saying, low paying is not an option for me. And I've had people kind of push back on that and say, hey, you didn't get into a PhD for money. And I'm like, but really?
I did though,
Did we not? Right. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's really real. So what do you do now?
Yeah, so now I work in civic tech, which is a branch of government contracting that looks to improve government services for everyday people. So, for example, the process of applying for Medicaid or for a immigration visa, applying for EBT benefits. My field looks to improve those services and also improve the procedures behind those that are typically old legacy government systems that it used to be that them existing was enough. So, for example, if you went through a storm like I did a couple weeks ago, it didn't matter that to apply for disaster assistance was this really difficult process with like 100, literally 100 pages of documents to fill out. And it was really difficult and you had to wait a long time. It was just enough that it existed. And now we're starting to see changes where it's like, it's not enough that it exists. This should actually be good so that it does help people, because who has time to fill out 100 pages of documents after their house has blown down in a storm?
Right. Wow. So you're helping to, is it close to process improvement, change management? Do you do any of that?
So that's really involved. I know that change management and like business process improvement is its own field, particularly in more like private
Yeah.
industry.
Sure.
But in civic tech, you kind of
Mm-hmm.
do all of it. So even though I'm technically on the user research side, part of improving those services is improving the processes behind them and then also improving and changing the
Right.
culture behind them. So we do a lot of implicit process improvement and change management, because to make those changes lasting, you actually have to have it be a cultural change from within the agency. So even though that's not
Right.
always a formal part of our job, it's very much an informal part.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. What does a typical day look like for you then?
Yeah. So now that I'm more in leadership and my IC responsibilities aren't as big, I spend more time in meetings, which is not my favorite part. So a typical day might look like starting off, checking in with my team, seeing if anyone needs help or there are any outages. Basically, like, where's everyone at for the day? Does anyone need help? What's going on? Then I might have meetings related to contract details. So there's a lot of compliance we have to adhere to when working with contracts. So there's like monthly reports and there's different, you know, um, just different things we have to do like every month to stay in compliance. So sometimes the meetings are compliance, sometimes the meetings are with stakeholders to discuss the work that's happening, what's coming up. Sometimes the meetings are with other teams when part of what we're doing intersects with them. So for example, if we're working on software, we might have to meet with other developers, we might have to meet with the like customer service reps who work with that service that we're looking to improve. So the hard part is that a lot of meetings in a row typically means it's a lot of context switching. So you're going from like one meeting that's
Mm-hmm.
on contract financials, the next meeting is on improving this process, the next meeting is checking in with a team member about a thing. So even if the topics are really interesting, the constant topic switching can lead to a lot of cognitive fatigue. So on meetings, on days that I have a lot of meetings, I do feel more worn out than on days where I get to just sort of focus or work quietly.
Right. Yeah, the blessings and the challenges of leadership is
Yeah.
that you get, there's definitely a lot of blessing in it, but then also like I felt your pain when you were like, I'm in meetings all day long because I don't enjoy meetings either. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. Let's talk a little bit about how you found this job. So you decided pretty early on that you were not going to work in academia. And I think that the people that may watch the series too may be in grad school and thinking, I don't want to work in academia. But I think always the challenge is, well, then how do I move from where I am to something like you're doing? So let's talk a little bit about your job search process and how you landed this job, or how
Yeah.
you actually transition. It doesn't have to be this job, because I know sometimes this is not people's first job, right? So
Yeah.
how did you make that transition? How did you find that first job?
It was really hard. And I think what is tough is that there is no one path. And I think the part that is
Yeah.
really difficult for a lot of people to accept is really just how random it is. So I had
Mm-hmm.
no idea what I was doing. I went to the Career Center and they helped me reformat my CV into a resume. And then I was just blind applying to jobs. Then I learned about informational interviews where I was contacting people on LinkedIn and asking if we could talk for 10, 15 minutes. And sometimes that led to interviews, sometimes it didn't. It was just a shot in the dark, especially when you don't have a network yet. And then the first job that I got post
Mm-hmm.
PhD was blind apply. It was random. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that something that's really hard to accept is that you can do all the things that you're told. You can network, you can go to events, you can make your resume look really good, you can do pro bono work. And then sometimes you're in the right place at the right time, and sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was a finalist
Mm-hmm.
for a job where travel was required. So it was remote, but they required that you lived within an hour from an international airport. And I did. But I
Mm-hmm.
lived in South Florida on the West Coast, and they had never heard of the airport near me. So they rejected me because they said,
Oh.
well, we've never heard of Southwest Florida International Airport. And that's a risk. That might not be
Mhm.
a very busy or hopping airport. And I remember being like, this is wild. But then the second job I got post PhD, I was going through message boards for UX research and design and found a post by someone
Okay.
going, we need to fill spots for a contract fast. Like, if you have research experience, apply. And I did. And I got that job within a week. So I think
Right.
what's so hard for those of us who come from academic backgrounds to understand is so much of it is not our skill, is not how hard we're trying. It's really random. There's a lot of bias. There's so much of it is out of our control. So sometimes it just happens. And then sometimes you're working so hard and you get to a finalist stage and it doesn't happen. So I say all of that not to be discouraging, but to just let folks know that it's hard to predict. And sometimes when you
Yeah.
happen onto success, it's not where you expected.
Thank you for sharing that because like you said, all the thing. And one of the things I've actually said often is all the things work. Like networking works,
Hmm.
LinkedIn works, having your resume works. All of that stuff works. But there's also the possibility that sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
And to not be disappointed, it doesn't mean like don't throw out a resume that does nothing for you. It doesn't mean you should remain a hermit. It doesn't mean you should just leave your LinkedIn profile a total mess. But at the same time, it's important to acknowledge that sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with you, that you were not chosen for a job,
Yeah.
right? And I think when I like to thank you for bringing that up, because sometimes people are like, but I'm doing everything right, and I've had to tell people, because people send me DMs, and I've had to tell people you could be doing everything right, and I'm not trying to be. So I don't think it's negative. I think it's just real,
Yeah.
right? That you could be doing everything right. It's just like almost everything in life is like that. You could be
Yeah.
doing everything right. Right. Anyway, so thanks for sharing that, because that's reassuring, that it's not always you. Um, do you think there was anything hard about making that transition from academia to industry? What was the hardest part of
Absolutely.
it?
It's a totally different culture because not only are you having to learn the culture of your new field. So, depending, are you going into finance? Are you going into big tech? I went into nonprofit first and then I went into civic tech. So, these all have their different norms. So, not only are you trying to learn what are like the values and norms of these new systems, but you're unlearning all the academic stuff. Like, I'm still, particularly with writing, like deprogramming from
Mm-hmm.
academic writing because everything that I wrote for a long time sounded like it was going into a
It's very
journal because that's how we were taught to write.
right.
So it's been a
Yeah.
concentrated effort, almost 10 years now, post PhD, and I'm still like unlearning writing and presentation
Mm.
norms that are there. There's also a lot different in what's expected with like work life boundaries and stuff like that. So you're really just learning like a new culture. It's like going to a new country and going like, all right, let's start fresh, and I have to watch what people are doing, what clothes are acceptable, what behaviors are acceptable. Like it's um there's so many differences that you don't think about until you're like in your first meeting, or even just the way people email each other, like what's considered acceptable etiquette for emailing. So I would say like learning
Yeah.
all those norms so that you are fitting in and you aren't perceived and don't feel as much of an outsider.
Right. And and with everything new in the beginning, it will feel uncomfortable. I remember one of my challenges was going into the corporate space and hearing all the acronyms. I'm like,
Oh
what?
my God, yeah.
I kept on writing. I kept on
What
writing
is
every
that?
acronym down because nobody explains anything, right? Nobody explains, oh, this acronym means this. They just like, it's just the whole language. It's just like the lingo. And I'm like, so like, I'm just like paying attention and then writing down the acronym so I can go check it out later. But yeah, absolutely. But eventually, you start to speak like that. But I think this also points, something that I think is a little wrong with corporate culture sometimes is like we throw the newbies to the sharks, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes if you don't have someone to guide you, you'll feel overwhelmed. Yeah. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely true. I think that you have to find someone that you feel safe going like, "Hey, someone said COB. What is that?" Because
Right.
not everyone will
What
be
is that?
safe in that way. And sometimes you're the
Right.
safe person. So if you are someone who understands that that is hard and there's a new person sometimes going like, "Hey, welcome." There might be a lot of terms and lingo you don't understand. If there's something you don't know, like just ask me. Like I've been through this and it's fine. Because yeah, I also would have that tab open going like, what's COB? What's EOD? What's BULF? Especially because in government work, when you're working with federal agencies, a lot of those folks come out of the military, and the military has its own it's such a joke that we call it TLAs, 3-letter acronyms. So they have their own TLAs. And so you're dealing with the corporate stuff, and then you're dealing with like the military and government stuff, and it just sounds like a foreign language. So I try to be helpful, or for a while I even had like a dictionary for like folks who were new to my team of like, here's some like abbreviations that you're probably going to hear, and we can keep adding to this as we go, because it can be so
Yeah.
pervasive that you leave a conversation going, I have no idea what just happened.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that you said, you can also choose to be somebody's safe space. So that you let the person, so the person doesn't feel lost. Thank you. Thank you for that. What transferable skills were helpful for you in moving into outside of academia? And what transferable skills do you use in your everyday work?
So, I would say the biggest thing from grad school is just the ability to learn something quickly, synthesize it quickly.
Hmm.
So don't
Hmm.
underestimate that we were trained to jump into new complex topics and make sense of it really, really quickly, quicker than the average person. What I also would bring up, though, as transferable skills, because I use this a lot, are people's other jobs. So I worked at a grocery store for 6 years. I worked in customer service, and those types of skills related to customer service or diffusing conflict or even peer-to-peer conflict, I use that all the time. So I would also say not just your PhD skills. PhD, I would say definitely rapid synthesis. But think about all the other things you've done. Did you work in fast food? Were you a babysitter? Did you, work in retail? Because that is half, if not more, of the transferable workplace skills that I use on a day-to-day basis.
That's very, very helpful. And yesterday I was actually having another conversation with somebody, and then she had brought this up about, the unlikely skills you picked up, like not even with grad school, but in life that you end up using. And you just talked about the grocery store. So, it's so wild. I used to work in retail too, and customer service is a big one, right? Because you realize that everybody is a customer. And so there has to be like that customer service in there. Well, this has been such a great conversation. And as we come to the end of our conversation, what last pieces of advice would you give to somebody that is in grad school right now and is realizing, listen, this going to be a postdoc and being underpaid as an academic is not for me? What would you tell them? What steps should they start taking to set themselves up for job searching success?
So I'd say two things, especially right now. The first is know that it's going to be a long and tough road. Right now, the market is really hard. I graduated from college in the middle of the recession in the 2000s. And I'm reminded of that right now a lot. So know that if you are transitioning now, you are entering one of the toughest, like white collar markets that, those of us under 50 have probably seen in our lifetime. So just know that it is a hard time.
Right.
And prepare for that, and maybe prepare for having, side gigs, like prepare for it being a long road where you're not going to land like your most stable thing right away. The other thing I would say, and this is really important for those of us coming out of academia, it is okay to want to make a good salary. It's okay. And it's okay to not love your job. It's okay to just go to work and do a good job and make money, and that's it. It is totally, totally okay. Don't have anyone make you feel bad because you want to make a decent, stable salary for yourself, for your family, for your community. There's literally nothing wrong with that. That was something that I saw a lot when I was coming out of academia. Was I was looking for 6-figure jobs, and people were telling me that that was unrealistic, that it was selfish, that it was materialistic. And I'm sitting here going, okay, but like my rent is due and I've got sick family members and like, okay, great. But like all these bills are still due and they're going to stay due. So I can't just like take a job for passion and hope everything works out well in the end.
It's going to be okay. Right. No, right on the money. Yeah. No, great piece of advice. No, like, it's a tough job market. It's what it is. Yeah. And I graduated college in 2006. So that was just like 2 years before.
Just right before, yeah.
The Great Recession. Yeah, right before the Great Recession. And then now we're here and it's like, today the Fed says that, and then tomorrow the Fed says this, and it's really important to realize, again, like back to the point we were making earlier, that it's not always about you, and it's not always you that's the problem. It could just be that the markets is the problem. And I love what you said about money. I remember bringing up this money issue on LinkedIn once, and the post kind of went viral, and I had a little bit of like backlash of people being like, well, yeah, money is not everything. You didn't get a PhD to get money. And I'm like, but then do you tell this to your landlord or to the mortgage company when they come and ask you for money? Do you tell them money is not everything? You don't say that. So somebody wanting enough money to just exist is not a crime, and so thanks for reminding us of that.
Absolutely. And I'll have to go find your post because I love seeing hot takes from people who probably aren't as financially insecure or didn't grow up that way. I hardly ever
Right.
See threads like that don't kind of start to get like really contentious.
Yes, it's been, I think that thread, it's been a while, but it's been like 2 or 3 years now. I'll have to find it, dig it up sometime. But thank you so much, Anne, for this
Thank
conversation.
you. Have a great rest of your day. I'm so happy you had me on.